Hello, welcome back everyone to another episode with Peter Engel and Mihai Algiu, exploring the teachings, practices of the fourth way, as well as the teachings and practices of non-duality. And if you come to the first video, just know that this is a larger playlist where there are 40 plus episodes. So if you're really interested in studying and practicing the fourth way, you can actually use this playlist and go from the beginning. Also, if you're really interested in this, we really recommend part of the fourth way study and practice is to study the knowledge, what's called the system, this philosophical practical system meant for transformation. And one way to do that is to watch this playlist from the beginning, but also highly we recommend to go to the masters, the early masters of the fourth way, and to get yourself a copy of Ouspensky's In Search of the Miraculous, as well as Ouspensky's The Fourth Way. Or you can begin with Ouspensky's Psychology of Man's Possible Evolution. So, but the aim of this talk, I was contemplating that one difficulty of walking on the fourth way path in 2025 is that we are so used now to some kind of a quick fix, easy method, go to a workshop, go to a satsang, and very simple, easy, no problem, lack of attention span, and in this age of electronics. So contemporary people may have maybe overwhelmed or had some resistance towards embarking on the fourth way path, because it's a very comprehensive and detailed system map designed for helping us where to walk, where to dig, where to walk, come out of prison. And it's kind of very comprehensive. And so the intention of this video is to somehow help people who are already interested, they studied it a little bit, and how to make their work, their practical work, self-work, or what we call first line, working on oneself by studying and applying, practicing, verifying, how to make this easier and how to guide one to develop their own practice in everyday life, and where to start. And among all this, let's say 100 ideas, what are the first 10 that are essential? It's almost like I was talking to Peter, like, how about this, like this board game where there are different squares, different players, and we're like, okay, you start, well, start here, and then go there, and then go there. I shared this with Peter some time ago. It's almost like a cheat sheet for developing in a work. And Peter initially was a little ambivalent about this idea because, you know, there's no cheat sheet from one angle. There's no shortcut. There's no, you got to be interested, and you got to put time and energy and attention, money. Yet we are going to attempt to do this. And yeah, so the question for both of us here is, or the topic is, okay, so somebody is interested, maybe read In Search of the Miraculous, so many ideas, diagrams, inspiring. But one has a little, okay, so now what do I do? How do I start? How? So what would you recommend? to establish a solid foundation. And one more thing I will say, Peter, sorry, before I give it to you. You said something very important. Maybe you can start with that. What's unusual about the fourth way and seemingly pessimistic, however, that's the foundation, that's where we can grow, is that it's important before we make a lot of efforts to become more awake and to be more conscious, we got to verify the fact that we are asleep from the point of view of consciousness. So verification of one's sleep is, it seems, for quite a long time, essential. And yeah, how to verify that and how to not be discouraged by that, how to be inspired by that, and how to go from there. So if somebody really interested will come to you, you have a few talks, you put them in the right direction, how would you guide them?
One way I try to guide people in this is to try to explain what, sort of in a larger sense, what the system is and how it is meant to be used. It doesn't mean there's a shortcut, but there are some key ideas. We've talked about this idea that consciousness is not aware of itself. And that's what self-remembering in the fourth way is. It's referring to consciousness realizing itself, recognizing itself as this awareness in the background, the source of this awareness, actually, which is in the background, and realizing itself there and coming to know itself, becoming more conscious. This is what, and the entire system is about this. Everything else relates to this. And then there are what we've mentioned before from the way Uspensky and Gurdjieff broke it down is there are 5 or 6 major quote unquote obstacles to self-remembering, to awareness realizing itself. Because you hear this, you think, okay, awareness, realize yourself, realize you're aware. Okay, now I'm just going to do that. Well, it doesn't work like that because it's not a mental thing, this being asleep and trying to wake up. It's about consciousness itself knowing it's here. Yes, as the non-dual traditions say, consciousness is always here. And in a sense, it's always aware of things. To different degrees, mildly or with more focus, but aware of. But the awareness that is aware is not recognizing itself. And this has to become a real verification for everyone. And so, but to go back to what I was saying a moment ago, how can the system be used? From one point of view, we can look at the system strictly as a method, a map, guidelines, practices for verifying that we are not awake, for verifying that we are asleep, meaning consciousness. The whole system leads you in that direction when you start to study it and apply it. And then once you do, once this starts to become truth for you, then the system can also be used to wake up. It's a map guiding consciousness. It's actually guiding the mind to be aligned with consciousness in such a way that consciousness realizes itself more often, more deeply. And so I thought one thing we could talk about is, all right, we want to be present, we want to be more aware, we want to be more conscious. First, we have to realize that's not happening. And when we realize it's not happening, then how do we go about reinforcing it? And these obstacles, we can talk about these, what I call these obstacles, because they can be viewed in different ways. From the one hand, they are obstacles, and we can touch on them a little bit, I guess, but the idea is that on the one hand, yes, awareness is here. It's trying to get to, you could say, its realization of itself, and there are things in the way. that stand in the way of that, that block that. But that suggests the obstacles are outside of consciousness, that there's something else. And you can view it that way. But that's not the only way to view it. Another way to view it is that that these obstacles are forms that consciousness takes when it loses recognition of itself. It lapses out of itself, it attaches, it becomes identified with a thought or a feeling, sensation, with another person, with an event, whatever it is. And now it has lapsed out of itself, and the form it takes becomes one of these so-called obstacles. Another way you can look at them is they're veils. They are psychological veils. And awareness or consciousness gets stuck in these veils, does not realize itself behind these veils. So there are a number of ways we can look at what they are. Another way, for example, is there are illusions. They're actually illusions. For example, imagination, this uncontrolled attention, associative train of thought, it's just running by itself all the time. We think we're thinking, we think we're planning and all of this, and it's just going on by itself. This, is actually an illusion. All of this. This is the mind is projecting this inside of us. And it's happening because it's like a substitute for awareness, really, being aware of being here now. If I look here and I see the computer and I see the microphone and I see the room and I see Mihai's face on the screen and I realize I'm seeing all these things and realize I'm here seeing them, there's no space or time now for imagination. At least as long as I'm conscious of being conscious of those things. But as soon as consciousness loses recognition of itself, it fixates, it attaches to these, whatever it's observing, and it starts to project this little mind dream. And this is illusion. And the same thing with there are other forms, what is called identification itself is a kind of illusion where we attach to things and we establish a sense of identity in relation to things, in relation to people, in relation to our own body, in relation to our career, relation to our bank account, all of these things. These are illusions. This is the illusion of identity, of self. Negative emotions is another illusion, oddly enough. Negative emotions are nothing but a form of really psychological resistance to reality. In the end, that's what you see negative emotions are doing. They're resisting and denying and rejecting what is actually happening. And it could be that if you could really see what's happening, if you just looked at what was happening very clearly, consciously, you would see things differently. But instead, we resist. We say, no, I don't like that. I don't want this to be happening. This shouldn't be happening. These people should be different. This should change. This is not good, etc., etc. But we do it with negative emotion. So that's another obstacle. That's another illusion. It's also a veil. It's also a form that awareness takes when it loses recognition of itself. It forms now into an identity. Isn't that strange? This formless consciousness, when it goes out of itself and attaches to things, it then actually kind of manifests in the form of those things. It's very peculiar when you see this. And you begin to kind of intuitively begin to explore, consciousness itself begins to explore what it means to know itself without attachment to anything, without attachment to any of the thoughts, the emotions, this life, this person, everything. What is that? What is that? Now we're going into this deep unknown. We're receding farther and farther into the background of our own being as just consciousness. This is not the normal experience for humans on Earth. This is very unusual. And that's why there's no cheat sheet. You can't just I'm hesitating because as soon as I said that, I thought of someone like Ramana Maharshi, who did seemingly go right to that experience in himself. And then he kept just trying to help people do the same. That was what his teaching was. His whole life was that. But anyway, I don't know if you want to talk more specifically about these obstacles, Mihai, or if something I've said has aroused some other related thoughts in you about this.
Yes. I mean, yes. I mean, one idea before we continue with the obstacles, because I think studying the obstacles in ourselves and struggling with them consciously, that's a that's a big pointer. That's a big part of the cheat sheet. That's how it was for me. Okay, so what do I do? Okay, observe these states of sleep. These obstacles are states of sleep. And so before I go into the other obstacles, I want to say that, so you are talking here about something that is, they throw right away in non-duality or direct path. They throw it right away from the beginning. They say, you know, realize that whatever you are aware of implies that there is this perceiving presence that you are, this perceiving presence, and just stay as that. This presence is aware of objects and aware of itself. So presence aware of itself. However, in my practical experience, both with myself and as well as with people, as I was guiding people, I could see that if I start with that, that is not accessible. And yeah, it's not a beginner's practice. And it can lead to a lot of mindfuckery, a lot of the mind trying to figure out this awareness, which is the invisible man. So that's why we can start with something prior to that, some type of conscious effort that will sooner or later lead to presence being more present online and then becoming aware of itself. So this prior practice is what's called in the fourth way is self-observation, or being present to what's happening, being present to phenomena, observing phenomena. In other traditions, watchfulness, in a Christian mysticism, in the Desert Fathers, like watchfulness, sobriety, you know, being present. In Buddhism, Thich Nhat Hanh will use the word mindfulness, although when there is a lot of mindfulness, actually there's very little mind. So this mindfulness is a little deceiving, but this people know what this mindfulness is. So this kind of the conscious effort of instead of being in the mind, in the thoughts, to pay attention to what's in the present, to notice. So that's what is that is the first step in my understanding. The first step to understand this effort, because it requires effort initially, because we are so accustomed to attention being sucked into the mind loops. So to kind of bring attention and anchor it into the sense field, as it said, to instead of being lost in thought as I walk or I sit on a bench, to be present to the breeze, to be present to the sounds, to be present to the sights, be aware, notice, be present to the inner world, impulses, urges, thoughts, feelings, and to the outer world. So that's what can be initiated right away. And one thing it's important here to say is that observing doesn't imply commenting or psychologizing, or it's just like a silent watching is present to the phenomena. Often when we start that, we watch silently, and we notice something, and then there will be a comment, or there will be a judgment about what we observe, or there will be, so we stop actually being present, and thoughts, commentary, narration comes about it. Now observation stop. So in the fourth way, there's this idea to train yourself to observe Mihai, everything to do Mihai, as a curious, interesting stranger, without judging it, trying to get rid of it. Gurdjieff would want people to do this mindfulness. Usually in today's mindfulness, I ask somebody, it's like, I've been practicing mindfulness for a long time. I say, well, what do you do? Tell me. And they said, well, I look at an object and I'm really studying it. And then, or I'm studying it and I'm also aware of the sounds. And I told her, this is good. This is good, but that's not very complete. So a more complete form of self-observation, or being present to the present, or mindfulness that's recommended by Gurdjieff, is to bring this being aware to all aspects of our machine, to all aspects of our experience, to be present to all aspects of our experience at the same time, not to just pick a sector. And what I mean by that, there is the sector of, thoughts, images, commentary. We are present to that. And then there is the sector of the emotions and sensations that usually people are not aware of. They are more in the head or aware of the world. They're not aware of the inner, the body, the energies, the feelings. So to be present to what arises in the mind, to be present to what arises in the body, and also not be oblivious of the world. So be anchored, still hearing, smelling. So to practice living like this, and to initiate this attempt more and more frequently, and to stay longer and longer. So now in this, awareness is still not aware of itself, but it's being jump-started to be less dormant, to be at least awake to something which is here, rather than start dreaming it. And when we start doing this, being present effort, then we see how quickly this will degenerate into thinking, and into more thinking about the work, and then thinking about my job, and thinking about other people. So this being present effort lapses into some obstacle, into being in daydreaming, or so the more that's how we're going to verify sleep, by initiating this being present to more and more, and realize how weak is this muscle, and how very quickly we revert to the normal state of being, which in the fourth way is called the second state, waking sleep, which is characterized by basically the second state, or waking sleep, the normal state of everybody, is actually, as you said it, what happens when awareness is dormant. Then this happens. Checked out in imagination, sucked into a feeling, sucked into judgments, having emotions about it, but not liking them, not wanting to feel them. And I can be in a beautiful meadow. There's no problem at all. It's beautiful. And I'm miserable with all of this inner videos and churning.
I think another way we can look at this is that attention and awareness are closely related. What usually is happening with us is that we are operating, our thoughts, our emotions, our movements, our sensations, all of this is operating with not very much attention, with uncontrolled attention. You get up, you reach for the cup, you type, you walk, you talk. All these things happen. We learn how to do them, but we don't really bring a lot of controlled attention to them. And now, often, what mindfulness is, it is the harnessing of attention. As you were describing, Mihai, the person explaining to you, well, I do this, I look carefully. And now the attention is harnessed purposely. It's almost, you could say, attention controlling itself, which is interesting. But this is not the full thing. That's why Mihai said it's not complete. Because what the next step, you could say, is for attention to yield itself to the source of itself, which is pure awareness or pure consciousness. So there's this sort. It's interesting to ask yourself, when you have attention, what's the source of this attention? And does this source know itself? This is what Gene Klein meant. Do you know the knower? The knower is knowing, looking at all these things. Do you know the knower of the knower? Really is what he was saying. Behind attention, there's a source. So we have to harness attention first. And in terms of the obstacles in the fourth way, all of them are connected to the two main ones, which are identification and imagination, both of which can be viewed from the point of view of attention. So imagination is just like, it's attention just kind of turning into soup. It just spilling all over the place. It's not, there's no attention. And so when you said earlier, how would I guide someone? Well, these are the two areas I would start and say, well, if you want to understand that you are what the fourth way calls asleep, start looking at yourself from this point of view. How often is your attention in your control? And when it's not in your control, what's happening to it? Where is it? You're in imagination usually of some form. And then you try to come back. You try to control it and come back to being present as best you can understand that. It almost doesn't matter how you understand it, but that you start to understand in some way that, suddenly you realize, wow, I wasn't present. I was in my dream world thinking about something that happened yesterday, or hoping something will happen tomorrow, or wondering, it can take so many forms, but the attention is gone. And you bring it back. And then identification is when the attention just gets pulled out completely by something. And now we are very focused, you could say, on something, another person, or on a project, or on my concern with my toe that I cut, or whatever it is. Now suddenly attention is pulled out of us forcefully. And this is what the fourth way calls identification. Now awareness, the source of this attention, has lost recognition of itself, and it's being pulled out by something, and it's being drawn to it. These are both examples of an uncontrolled attention, and then attention being controlled by something else, not by its source. And this being present, self-remembering, as the fourth way calls it, is about attention not so much returning to its source as the source of attention realizing itself. Just for example, right now, and here's an interesting question to put out to people, a little exercise for them. Try to understand for yourself, try to explain to yourself the difference between attention and awareness. So for instance, right now, you can only focus on one thing at a time with your visual attention. You can't see the whole room at once. You can look at objects, but only one at a time. So attention is a narrow field. It is like the flashlight shining its light through a narrow beam on objects. And it's interesting, even our human eyes, we have peripheral vision, but it's out of focus pretty much. And then the real focus is very narrow. And awareness is when awareness realizing itself is this narrow focus as it sort of comes back to its source, as the flashlight itself realizes itself, it widens. So like you can also be here without even focusing on anything. in particular. Just realizing you're sitting in your room, in your chair. There's a general broad awareness. And it's more than just instinctive, tactile, registering tactile things. Interesting, you're aware. And then if you notice, this can get very big. You can realize without focusing on anything, you're not only in your room, you're in a house, you're in a city. Look here, I'm in the state of California. It can get quite expansive, let's call it, but it's not necessarily focused on a narrow way. So when we're identified, usually it's very narrow. Even when I focus, it's narrow, but if I become identified, it becomes even more narrow. And now consciousness is manifesting itself in the form of attention that then becomes identification and or becomes imagination. As I said, it just kind of becomes like loose spaghetti. It just going down the drain. Imagination is really, in effect, it is awareness going down the drain, away from itself, away from its source. So these are the two areas I also try and would try to say to someone, okay, you want two practical things to work on. Look at yourself from the point of view of imagination, how often you find yourself in imagination with no attention, and how often you find yourself identified, hurried, anxious, nervous, pressing something, being insisting on your opinion, becoming very defensive. These kind of things where there's this ferocity is a higher burn of energy going on in you because now you're more attached and you feel your identity is at stake with these things and you must persist with your opinion or your plan or whatever it is. So just study yourself from these two perspectives and then try to understand when you're not in imagination and when you're not identified, or when they are very diminished, let's say. What is your experience? If you're not identified and you're not in imagination, and I won't say what I feel the answer to that question is. This is for anyone watching this to explore. What's happening with attention and awareness when you're not in imagination and you're not identified? This can show a person a lot about everything else we're talking about, or the only thing we're talking about, really. The only thing we're always talking about.
Huh. Yeah, I like that what you brought this tool or practice, which is another way to jumpstart the sleeper awareness, which is I sense it's not very accessible at the very beginning if one is really lost in thoughts all the time. But what you described as having this the not focused but open attention, some kind of global sense of noticingness, as if you are the Grand Canyon and you don't focus on a little brush. There's like all this global noticing of a whole panoramic thing. So that is a practice to stay present, not necessarily focus on something, stay globally present. It's possible not to focus and still notice a lot in terms of sounds, sights, and to, as Goju would say, the role of the head is to be present as a watchman. So, and have some, knowing that there will be some commentary coming up soon. It's going to be coming up soon. So having this watchfulness, part of that global, all-encompassing being aware, also notice how there will be thoughts and not be sucked in them, then they will fall away. Or notice also include the body. So this open, diffuse Also, in many traditions, it's recommended this practice of formal meditation. And the people I work with, I find it very useful, so they don't fool themselves pretending that they are practicing all day, to actually have 20 minutes to just do that. And so in this fourth way style meditation, my term, but that also would be like to go to this open, focused, defocused, yet alertness, and welcoming the totality, all of this that's happening. However, not going in daydreaming, but also not snuffing away thoughts. Like all of these perceptions are loud, and however, yeah.
Also, awareness is just the word itself, awareness. We tend to think of it as awareness on things, awareness of things. But in the highest sense, and that's true, that's true about awareness. But in a higher sense, awareness is realization. This is different. It's realization. And in the simplest sense for us, it's the realization of being. It's the realization of existence. It's the realization of being here. And it need not be always being directed onto things. That it's worthwhile it's worthwhile asking, if you take away these words, what do we really mean? What are we talking about? What is awareness? Take away this word. What is attention? Take away that word and try to understand for yourself, realize for yourself what these are. It's called imagination. It's just a word. What does it really mean? What's it referring to in terms of our being? And then realizing, see, that's what happens. You realize suddenly that you were an imagination. Yes, you can see the imagination. You can look, you can see it. You're watching it. You're watching the movie inside. But then you realize yourself, meaning consciousness realizes itself in the back of the theater watching. And it's a realization. I think this gets lost. And it's can be one of the pitfalls of mindfulness, that following that idea of mindfulness and making it too narrow. Realization.
Yeah, that was the pitfall I fell in, because I was practicing this type of all-encompassing being aware for a long time as a person. Like, it was Mihai, the practitioner, which was not investigated, questioned the identity of me. And from that misunderstanding, I was practicing mindfulness a lot. And I thought that if I do this a lot, all the time, basically, if I do this a lot all the time and then have no thoughts, then I will attain something. So there was the misunderstanding. But I can see now that if you are kind of practicing this being more present a lot and bring oneself back to the phenomenal present rather than in daydreaming, the next step is at some point to realize that, as Ramana would say, whatever is arising, whatever I'm present to, what is that which is aware of it? So sooner or later, the next step is realizing that it's not just stuff coming and going, phenomena, impermanence. There is that which is aware, which is invisible, yet we are it. So now that will be what's called a glimpse. There's not just all this in the fourth way, many eyes, all the impulses, which at the beginning there are a lot of impulses. It's almost like the sky is clouded and there's storm, so one cannot see the sky. But as the weather gets somehow a little bit more calmer, then one can see the sky. Or as one gets less asleep and less sucked into content, awareness may, especially if it's told or their practice is pointing to that, it can evoke the conscious realization of that. Although it is useful to understand intellectually first, this thing, like they say in the fourth way, you are what observes, not what is being observed. And Buddha teaching meditation in some sutra, he will say, whatever thought arises, no, it's not I, it's not me. It's just a thought arising and passing. Whatever feeling arises, it's not I, it's not me. It's just a feeling arising and passing. Whatever sound, and so on.
And another thing we talked about, Mihai, you mentioned this a little while ago, but you just touched on it, and that is, it's often said, well, if you really want to wake up, if you really want to become enlightened, however you choose to say it, you need to have this passion. You need to have this zeal, this drive, this sincere, genuine, deep. You're going for it at the expense of everything else. It has to be the priority, and so on. But this is, where do you find this? How do you find this in yourself? And the way the fourth way presents it is by verifying, by seeing. Actually, what's interesting, the more you see that you are, quote unquote, asleep, the more you wake up. And so it's kind of, waking up is like seeing you've been asleep the whole time. It's so full seeing of your own sleep marks the threshold of real, true awakening. Now, that's just a way of saying it, of course, but the point is, the best motivation, the best inspiration for trying to be more present is realizing you're not. And tasting that and knowing it. And you can even get to the point where you feel kind of just agitated, or something's wrong, something missing. And you know a lot of this. You've already thought about it for a long time. You've been working in these areas. You've been whatever you've been doing. And you just feel something's not. And it's because awareness is not present as itself. It's still going into the mind. It's still going into the body. And it hasn't fully comprehended itself as this awareness, this consciousness. And you can develop a strong distaste for imagination, a strong distaste for identification, and your barometer for those things can become much more sensitive, such that as soon as you see them in yourself happening, consciousness retreats into itself more. It doesn't want to be lost. It doesn't want to get lost. It doesn't want to get pulled out. It doesn't want to drain out. It wants to stay, wants to stabilize in itself more and more. But this idea that first you have to verify that you're asleep. You have to verify that consciousness, and here's what's interesting, consciousness has to verify this. Consciousness has to begin to realize itself. And in the beginning, the realization of itself is the realization that it hasn't been here, that it was lost in imagination, it was lost in identification. It's not an intellectual thing. Its verification is not like the body verifying the stove is hot, or the mind verifying that 2 + 2 = 4. Again, it goes back to realization. Awareness realizes it's not realizing itself. And that is the fire. This fire is the one that burns. And it burns, you could say, in consciousness. It's more than even an emotional desire. It's all about realization. And again, the fourth way is, I think, an interesting approach, an interesting system, because that's where it says you go first. And here are all these ideas that can show you this. And then once you see that, you can use those same ideas to transcend yourself.
I appreciate how we are pedaling on two different tracks here, and which I think is great, because the people who are watching and they're practicing, they are different levels. So you are saying, hey, yes, this mindfulness is good, it's necessary, this being present is necessary, but go further, realize that which is aware of these things. And I'm saying, yes, that's very important, but it might not be accessible. So you need to practice a lot of self-observation and all of that. So at the beginning, or for quite some long time, this being present more and more frequently and longer, and struggling with sleep as in the form of falling asleep in the mind stream, working with imagination, that is a lot already, and that is very practical. And what's interesting is that from one angle, all obstacles are a form of consciousness identified with something and takes a certain flavor. So the imagination is consciousness identified with the thought stream, commentary, narration, plans, rehashing, songs. However, there's much more in this imagination, because if somebody looks at me in a certain way and it touches a certain button, then I'm going to walk away from them, and then I'm going to have imagination about this, and what was that about, and so I may have judgments while in imagination, judgments, assumptions, taking it personally, then having interpretations like, how it's not okay, how dare they, so there's already inner considering, concern, identify what they think, or they didn't respect me enough, they didn't approve, they didn't see me, they didn't. And then I'm irritated, resentment, and I'm so tired of people like that. And so now basic negative emotions are expressed in this reactivity and taking things personally, and this dreaming of a certain twisted reality that maybe the other person actually looked at us and actually they were thinking about their grandmother that died, so none of it is real. So in the form of imagination, sleep, there all obstacles can play out. Concerns, what other people think about us, self-pity can be all this self-pity, self-deprecation, the negative voice in the head, self-hatred, judgment, how people should be, how the world should be, a victim, resentment. So the whole everything, the whole mechanics, the whole false personality, ego, trauma, pattern, they are playing out there. So that's why struggling with that, it's so essential. And what is interesting is that I'm a psychotherapist. I work as a psychotherapist and studied psychology, psychotherapy, and there's some great stuff, man, in psychology, psychotherapy. I mean, there's some great stuff, and some of the psychologists, the psychotherapist masters, and they went beyond the mind, I feel. And however, they don't talk about in any psychology, any psychotherapy, they don't talk about this state of being asleep in imagination. They don't talk about it. It's never considered that that's a problem. It's never even considered. And that they can see how this is the psychotherapy of sleep, where the patient is coming to the therapist thinking about what they're going to talk about and thinking about all these things and churning on the problem. And the psychotherapist himself is preparing to have a session in imagination, is in imagination himself, worrying about this and, oh, I don't know what to do. Am I good enough? I don't know if they'll come back to me. So basically the psychotherapist and the patients, they are all in imagination in the session, could be identified, But let's come back here.
But I'd like to add something here, Mihai. It's very interesting, your description. And of course, I find it humorous because it's so true. But what's amazing, we believe it all. Our natural condition of consciousness is all of this is happening also at rapid speed. The way this unfolds in us, that think they don't like us, why they looked at me a certain way, did I do something wrong? Or why did they dare look at me that way? And all these things. This is happening, and it's such a familiar film in our mind that our consciousness attaches to it, and then we are that, we become that. And all of this is racing through us, and it has a visceral effect on the body even. Sometimes these emotions and thoughts can create these strong instinctive reactions in us, and vice versa.
That
strong instinctive reactions.
They create more thoughts, then I'm like, oh my God, I'm trapped. There's no way
and
to
it feeds
go.
itself. Yes. Yeah. But what's astonishing is all of this is illusion. All of this is imagination. And it doesn't mean that we can't have a perception. Maybe the neighbor really doesn't like us. And they looked at us like, oh, there's Peter again. Maybe so. But even if we perceive that correctly, it's one thing to just see that and know it. It's another for all of this to start churning in us in the form of a reaction that is wholly imaginary. And this is very startling to see the full extent to which this is going on most of the time. And it can become kind of like it's like a circus, like a magic show, but it's also like a carnival. And it can become comedic, it can be tragic, it can be historical, it can take a lot of forms. But all of that is not this realization. I'm now pedaling on the other bicycle for a moment. Yes. But this is what we want to see through self-observation, see this more and more clearly. We have thought all of our life this was who we are, this movie playing inside, and it's not. It's not the source of our being.
And it's totally possible. I didn't think it's possible. And other people I talked to, but we're always going to have that. We're going to struggle with that. I noticed that through persistent effort in a skillful way, and through this recognition of awareness, and through bringing awareness to strong patterns and all these negative emotions, reactivity, they are no longer okayed. Hey, it's okay to go on like this for hours and hours. These are not okayed anymore. Gradually, they are diminishing. These powerful forces, they are diminishing, and awareness is more able to stay with the here and now. And
yes, we feed imagination by indulging in it. It happens, and then we indulge it and indulge in it, and that just feeds it. And so then the less we indulge it, the less we feed it, the more it diminishes.
Yes. And it can get to a point where the mind is often naturally quiet, and presence is naturally present, just like it is in dogs and deers and toddlers. It's more interested and takes more enjoyment into reality, what's here, as opposed to the dreamings. And then the mind is less vicious. It's not vicious, actually. It's no longer vicious. It's not attacking the world or myself. It's benevolent. It can be quiet, like a well-trained dog is not barking all the time, is quiet when it's not needed, waiting for the master to have something. So the mind becomes useful and diminishes a lot. And that's not that's not something like, oh my God, whoa, this is like amazing, deep awakening. That also becomes kind of normal. it's normal, it's kind of ordinary. Almost one forgets how was all the time thoughts all the time. But my last point here, what I like to paddle on this in this little episode, is although some of you will be like, yeah, I get it, I want to do this, I want to be it, yes, it's all clear. It's still difficult because we are surrounded in a society, everybody is not making this effort, nobody talks about it, and we are bombarded with pursuits of all kind of sorts that are unrelated to this. And then we are in life and busy and money and jobs and pressure and government. So it's not enough just to know about this and say, okay, I'm going to work with it. I'm going to work with it. But soon you are going to forget about it for a few days. So it's important. That's why in the fourth way, it's a practical. And one way to strengthen the work at the beginning is to allocate some time. Allocate some time. Maybe an hour a day. Or half an hour a day. An hour a day, ideally early in part of the day. And we need to feed this. We need to feed this. So maybe read a little bit from a workbook, read from Uspensky, read, watch some of these videos, and then kind of go for a walk. I did this today. I just, also what I do is I wake up, I start to do this exercise that you recommended. In the fourth way, we have practical exercises, alarm clocks, to remind us, knowing that we'll forget. The constant state is forgetfulness. So we need a lot of reminders to remember, to practice even. So yeah, when go for a walk, no headphones, no nothing, where you have 10 minutes on the clock, you're just very present. And watch out when you catch yourself in imagination, bring yourself back, feel the feet on the ground, feel the breath, feel the sounds, global awareness. Do this for 10, 15 minutes. Have a little bit of self-remembering meditation practice. Have 10, 15 minutes of starting watching the breath. This helps at the beginning if you have lots of thoughts, watching the breath, and then not going imagination, then opening to some kind of global sense of being aware, thoughts, sensations, being present, allowing them to be, things like that. Then that's why a group is necessary. I'm doing a group, and then we are all on this page, and every week I give them homework. So we have practical exercises, homework. And then we talk about it, and then we talk among each other about this. So this cannot be done alone, really. We are not saying this for us to have students or to make money and whatever. We say this for you. I couldn't do this alone. I couldn't. So the forces of sleep and the inertia, the momentum of dreaming is so big that we really need to have a lot of reminders, even to make effort. Even for a little bit. Driving, I used to have this exercise, I'm driving. That's a great time because, it's kind of automatic. We don't have to pay a lot of attention. And usually what's happening, we are daydreaming, imagination. So, and to say, okay, from here to Sacramento, an hour and a half, I'm going to not be in imagination. That's not realistic. Put 15 minutes, put 10 minutes. Where you have this effort for 10 minutes.
Or less.
Yeah.
Till the next stop sign or the next telephone pole. Honestly. To displace imagination with presence for 7 seconds, 8 seconds. From here till the next telephone pole. This is big, surprisingly. That's how powerful the momentum of imagination is normally in us. There's no break in it whatsoever. Mm-hmm. And so we start by trying to put a few breaks in there. Normally imagination is displacing our own awareness. And now what we're trying to do is reverse that, really. We're trying to displace the imagination. But ironically, we're not displacing it. We're simply awareness is restoring itself. And then but it's still, that's the space that's being filled in our life is now being filled more with presence and less with imagination. But it takes a long time for this ratio to shift in the favor of awareness.
Mm-hmm. So this alarm clock, small aims, it's very essential, because although you understand, you're willing to do it, you won't be able to do it. So signposts, as Gurdjieff would say. And exercise would be like, okay, choose an activity like going to the bathroom to relieve oneself. We are always in imagination when we do that. And to actually say, hey, each time I go to the bathroom, it's like a sacred meditation. So I let the body relieve itself and just staying present, resting, feeling what's happening, not anticipating anything. Yeah, so, and if we work for a few weeks with that, we may create this conscious habit somehow. Whenever I sit on the bathroom, like, oh, yeah. It may take some time for that to develop. Or shower, having a shower. My spiritual work is to be present to the how wonderful it is that this water, to feel the water, to feel the body, to be and not be in imagination. Yeah, choose an activity like this for a week or two and stay with it. You'll discover also when we go in imagination, the posture changes. Some other things are happening there if you start to become more aware. So I noticed myself that whenever I go in imagination, I start fidgeting. Something does something, it plays with a nail or with my lips, kind of chewing or biting. So now I have an exercise which is very useful. Very often, whenever I notice this, some kind of working something, some kind of this, which is also unnecessary. I think there's imagination happening, some identification, and there's some release of energy for these tics. So whenever I catch myself doing the fidgeting or fidgeting with my mouth, use as alarm clock to come back to conscious effort. And there are many, many such exercises, and we recommend. So this is more like a tutorial for how to start, this video. In the earlier videos, there is a video we done on self-remembering, self-observation, mindfulness. Very thorough video. I recommend you watch that. We did an earlier video in this playlist on imagination. Actually, there's a video on each obstacle, but with the video on imagination and practical exercises around that. I also have a playlist called the Toolbox series with for 100 short videos, and each video gives a practical exercise to practice awareness more in everyday life. There's a hearing exercise, the listening exercise, the many things like that.
I also now have a site on Substack for anyone who's interested. And if you're a subscriber to my site on Substack, I offer weekly things of this nature, reminders, little exercises, little tips, along with articles that I write that you can read the entire article each week.
Yeah, actually, I subscribed to you, and I didn't know what will happen, and so I really enjoy. I get every day. Actually, I'm getting either a short video or actually, last meeting when I had with my group, I hope it's okay. I read the whole thing from what you sent about imagination and all of that. That was like the workbook that was right there. So the principle of reminders in a world that is asleep, to be reminded, to give attention to this. yeah, so I wanted to finish with this, and I hope we continue to move on. Still kind of tutorial how to start the work, how to continue the work, but that's already here a lot. That's a lot here. And then we'll continue some more. But I re-listened to Thich Nhat Hanh recently, which he was a master of self-observation, of this mindfulness. He called it mindfulness, but anyway, I really like this phrase. He said, when you are having your cup of tea, this is the most important thing. You're driving and you're looking at this is the most important thing. Like being present to it is the most important thing. So I started to have this reminder, and even this like a mantra. Hey, I'm there, but it starts to be veiled with what's not there. It's like, hey, no, this is the most important thing. All right, Peter. Thank you. And feel free to send us here topics of interest connected to what we are talking about or your observations, and good luck. It's worth it.